through these fields of destruction. Baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your suffering as the battle raged high, and though it hurt me so bad.
Welcome to Voices of the Republic. I'm Mike Chisholm. Thank you for joining me today. We have a variety of topics we're going to be discussing today, one of which is called democide. I must say I've just learned about the word democide a few weeks ago, and I was very much taken aback. This is a live show, and if anyone wants to call in, you're welcome to. I have several guests with me today. In addition to democide, we're going to be speaking about states' constitutions and how they vary from abridged to infringed and how those wording can affect us. Additionally, we'll be talking about the government dole, how we're all in the government dole in some way or one way or another. The more and more we continue to depend on the government, the more and more we'll be. Well, anyways, let me introduce my guests. I have Mike Todhunter with me today. Thank you for joining.
Pleasure to be
Steve
here.
Blair and Chance White. And before we get going and talking to the guests and their opinions, and I'd like to show a little 13-minute video. In fact, I have a 13-minute video, and then I have two other videos, which are 3 minutes and 10 seconds on each. But we're going to discuss each video after it's on. So, Ken, if you're ready, anytime you want to play that one video so we can talk about it? If not, I'll keep on.
Not loading, Mike.
What's that?
Not loading.
Not loading. You're kidding me. Okie dokie. Well, maybe we will just start talking about democide. Let me read what the definition is. And this is one thing about live TV. Things go wrong, and you just got to shoot from the hip. No pun intended, guys. Democide is the murder of any person or people by a government, including genocide, politicide, or mass murder. Someone has said that we've probably had over 180 million deaths due to democide. Anyone has some input on that?
Well, actually, the figures can run higher than that, especially the last few years in Africa. And there have been numerous murders in South Africa that have been extremely political, that are not even being acknowledged by the South African government.
And that's been going on for a long time, hasn't it?
Yes. As you would call, the reacquisition of land from the white farmer, for example. Massive amount of murders of both races, white and black, are occurring all over that country. And these lands are not returning to the common people. They're being returned or given to politically advantaged people in the government.
Wouldn't you say in a way that we're moving in that direction too?
Well, it's sure I would say that, yeah, they're attempting to go that way. There was a report of an email that was leaked from the White House that right after Eric Holder was appointed Attorney General, that said there would be absolutely no, as in zero, Department of Justice cases of so-called minority violations of civil rights of whites while he was in office.
I have a question for the general public out there too, and I think the number will be running down on the screen. Why do we always have to between whites and blacks? Why between Asians and Hispanic, or between, why do we have to always do that? Why can't we just, like Rodney King once said, why can't we all get along? And that's, you know.
You know, I think this is one of the most destructive things that our government's doing, and when the history books are written, they're going to look back and they're saying, how was division perpetrated by government? Because, you know, as you know, Mike, you know, my career was in Southern California, and I was working in an extremely diverse school. I don't know, if you called it the hood, you wouldn't be far off. And what's so interesting about that is it was a great learning experience, because I learned that good people come in all races, and good students, bad students, good athletes, bad athletes. And when you're living in such a diverse environment, and you see that the only thing that really matters is you're a man or a woman, and it's the quality of your character. And once you really get past that, and you can really see people for what they are. For years, my assistant coaches were African American. And I remember having a conversation with one of my coaches. He says, all I really want to do is be considered a man, to be judged as a man, not to be judged as a black man or a white man, but just a man. And reading this history, I'm reading the history of Texas Now, Michener, and about the black families and the discrimination that they went through in our early history. When I look around, in my experience in the schools, is I saw so many mixed race couples. I saw so many people of quality of all color. And there was a lot of bad actors too. But when you're in that environment, of course you came from Hawaii, so you know.
Small little island.
You've been exposed to diversity.
Yes.
And I really think that people that make this an issue are unconsciously creating division. And all it does is perpetrate it. My wife and I went to the DMV the other day, and there was a form we had to fill out, and they wanted to know what color we were. And it had something to do with registering a vehicle. Yeah. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think it's so much the individual person anymore. I think it's the governments or those that are in power that continually wants to perpetrate it or spin the pot. You know, just continue to stir the pot and get us even more.
I mean, let's get real. I mean, we have African American president. We have people within the cabinets who are African American. We have Attorney General that's African American. Have African American senators, congressmen. In the cities, you have governments predominating with people of color. In the state governments, the same thing. I mean, it's this old idea that we're in kind of a Jim Crow society and that we still need big government to correct the injustices. You have to turn over a lot of rocks to find the kind of prejudice that some would like to advocate still exists. And my experience is that this is a lot to do about nothing.
I don't know. My brother-in-law is all he's ever wanted to be known as was a man. And the worst prejudice that he ever received was from his own race. His peers through high school chastised him, stole his books, wanted to beat him up, just because he wanted to advance his education, because he wanted to learn. When he got into college, his black professors chastised him, called him Toby.
Toby?
He was black.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
And kept telling him that the white man just wanted to keep him down, and that, you know, why was he trying to learn, you know, a white man's education? And all he wanted to do was to get his degrees so he could get better pay and earn money. It wasn't, you know, what he felt was a white man's education versus a black man's education. You know, he just wanted to get an education. And he just got nothing but trouble from people from his own race, trying to keep him from achieving his goals. And it angered him.
Well, you know, I was an educator, and the last thing I would ever do was tell somebody that they were a victim.
It came to be.
Because they might just believe it. And that's destructive, because if somebody buys into that rationality, then all else fails. And your job as an educator or as a parent is to motivate people and to encourage them to say whatever obstacles or barriers are in your way are only as significant as you attribute them to be. And that despite all this, you can achieve greatness. And some of the most motivated kids I ever knew were kids who wanted to get out of that trap of victimization. And if you see the effort they put into it, there's nothing that can hold them back. They are as motivated and as intense as anything you can imagine.
Yeah.
When I grew up in Hawaii, we were a melting pot. I'm sure people heard that, you know, Hawaii's a melting pot. We had no prejudice. I am not prejudiced. I don't care if pink, gold, yellow. It doesn't matter to me. If you're an American, you're an American, period, end of story. And I guess I was one of the luckier ones to grow up on a small little island. Pretty much half of the island was my family. But we had Filipino, Japanese, Fijian, Guamanian, Samoan. They were tough guys, Samoans, I tell you. But we didn't have that division. We were basically all living on an island. We all got along. Of course, we had our shortcomings. I mean, everybody has their shortcomings. Who doesn't? That's one thing I want to say. I have a dog named Boo Boo. I named it after my car accident. I called him Boo Boo. Her name was Rose before.
A little bit bigger than a Boo Boo.
That was bigger than a Boo Boo, yeah. But I look at my dog Boo Boo, and unconditional love. Dog doesn't care what color you are, as long as you treat him right. And I think that's what we need today. We just need to treat each other right. And we need to, I know we were getting a little off course here from democide, and I think a lot of it may play into democide, where the government say, like with Hitler, how the Jewish people are bad, let's exterminate them. And we can't let that happen in our country, guys. We can't let that happen. I mean, this is unrehearsed because I had a couple of things planned, like videos, so we're just shooting from the hip, guys. You can call.
You know what's funny, you're talking about that, one of my favorite authors is Wilbur Smith. He writes The History of Africa. And the conflict, the democide that you were talking about in Africa is largely tribal. And it's hundreds and hundreds of years old, and of course it's sort of morphed into this kind of union between tribes and government, and you know, you have those in power and those that aren't. But what's interesting about it, because you don't think of prejudice in these terms, but tribalism as prejudicial and racially prejudicial, because sometimes in the history here of Africa that Wilbur Smith would write about, it was people had a particular look, or the shade of their color of their skin was different. But believe it or not, in the heart of Africa, this tribalism was regional, it was economic, but it was also this kind of subculture of racism. And you never think about it in those terms.
No. Is that why they...
And millions of people were killed.
Is that why they had, you know, as we've seen, the wife, the daughter of the chief would marry the son of the other tribe to keep peace? Chance, you're real quiet today.
Oh, I'm just taking it all in. I'm sorry.
I like your attire, by the way. It's
Thank you.
Scottish, isn't it?
Yes.
What part of Scotland?
What part of Scotland? Oh, my family is rich in Celtic history, both on my mother and my father's side. There's intermarriages with several clans.
Yeah, this is what I was going to ask. I mean, they had a lot of battles too.
Right.
You know, just like in, I guess, Africa or in any country, guys.
When the clans weren't warring against each other, they'd be warring against the crown, whoever was, you know, the king for the day, whether it's English or Scottish, whatever. By nature, they had a lot of wars going on, a lot of fighting.
Well, I hope Ken here on Vision 12, and I really appreciate Vision 12. They got a great staff here. I hope he can get the video running, because it was a 13-minute video that I got off of YouTube that talks about how human nature, human beings, always likes to somehow dominate the other. And I think a lot of that is the problem we have today. Our governments are dominating us. We're dependent on our government. I think, 46% now are on some kind of government dole, government assistance, and they're pushing. I saw a video on YouTube, and YouTube's a great source for information, but it says, if you type in, how do I get Social Security? How do I get whatever? There's a breakdown of everything. It's just amazing. And I guess the government's pushing for us to continually let everybody get on the government dole. So when they want to pull the plug, we're out there.
Well, it's not just that. They're also, the society is pushing pacifism of those of the general citizen, and wanting to leave any form of assistance to only those who are in charge, and not to our neighbors or to other citizens. They only want those who are in authority to give any type of aid, whether it be aid of protection or aid of food or, aid of, income to those who are in authority, and not to our neighbors, and not to our brothers, those who should be giving most of the assistance that people need in protection of, say, somebody who is robbing you. For instance, the kid that was suspended for school.
Yes.
Because he disarmed another student who was going to shoot another kid.
That was on the bus, on the school
Yeah,
bus.
that was on a school bus.
Where was that, in Atlanta, or? That happened a couple days ago, or was it yesterday?
Yeah, it happened 2 or 3 days ago. I believe it was in Georgia, in
16-year-old kid, right?
16-year-old kid disarmed a football player who was going to shoot another football player with a .22. That one kid took the gun away from the football player, who was in the process of shooting another kid, had the gun to his chest. And one student knew that it was going to happen and wasn't going to let it. Well, the school decided, hey, we can't have other students getting themselves involved in stopping this. What should have been done was to have the police called.
After he had shot 4 or 5 persons.
Well, so, hey, just because, it's too bad, so sad that maybe 3 or 4 other kids would have died in the process, but the proper authorities would have taken care of the job. Well, they want us to be sheep. Well, I'm sorry.
I'm a wolf. Well, what, sheepdog.
There's a tendency by the government to divide us in so many different ways. You're talking about why do we talk about blacks or Hispanics or whites? Why we don't just refer to ourselves as Americans?
There you go. Yes.
This is how it should be. But as long as I can remember, the government has divided us in one way or another, from the old days of separate drinking fountains, depending on what the color of your skin was, or you had to have a separate swimming pool for certain people. Back of the bus instead of sit wherever you want to. There was always a division of some kind. And then you get sociologists that come in and they want to do their demographics. They want to do their scientific research. What is the subculture here, and how many people are living in this neighborhood, and what's their skin color, and you start filling out these forms to go to school or to get a loan or whatever, and they're asking you if you're a Pacific Islander or
Portuguese,
Hispanic or other. I remember filling out other, and
and you're wondering why.
They wanted to know why. He
Why?
said, well, because I'm Irish, and he laughed, because he saw the humor of it. Because there's no block for Irish, and
But then other carries everything.
yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting about it is that we really have evolved as a civilization, as a country, to the point where discrimination as historically is defined is really a tough fit to prove by what's happening in the world. But psychologically, at a more primitive state, people always seek similarity. It is not unusual for me as an Anglo to have lots of Anglo friends, or somebody as a Hispanic to have a lot of Hispanic friends. We live in neighborhoods where our neighbors are like us. We associate with people who are like us, maybe politically, maybe socioeconomically. It is not that we're hardwired that way, and biologically through evolution, it's served as a way to survive. It was a survival mechanism because those people who weren't like us threatened us. And that was really the history of early man.
That brings up...
And we lived in clans, we were clannish, but today we've evolved to where those kinds of wiring doesn't impact our decisions socially or politically. I mean, to an extent there's some overlapping, but it really is a testimonial that we've been able to evolve to the point where we don't make almost all our decisions based on similarity.
But that doesn't mean we're prejudicial, you know?
No.
Well, back in the 70s, it was late 70s, 75, 76, LAPD, California. I applied for a job there, and in those days they had something called an affirmative action plan. And what they were doing was they were setting a certain number of slots open for females, Hispanics, or blacks. So that meant, and this was how I lost the job. I had an academy seat, a date to start school, and I'd gone through all the testing, physical and mental. Last thing I got to do is talk to a psychologist who's got a little voice recorder going. Is there anything you'd like to say? Now, up to this point, I've been quiet all my life, not really wanting to like voice my opinion. I'll just keep it to myself, just go with the flow. But for whatever reason, one of those galactic stupid moments just seized me, and I had to speak out. I said, yeah, actually there is. I don't think it's right that you're allowing people to have a job solely because of their skin color or their gender. And he knocks that button down to stop the recording, you know, and the next thing I know I have to do another psych test, and he gets me for being pessimistic towards people and a predisposition towards violence. Yeah, so my argument was, if I'm a police officer on patrol and my partner is there not because he performed the best in the physical aptitude and the mental aptitude, but he's there because his skin color is different than mine, or she's there because a different gender. I want the guy or the girl protecting my back because they're the best at what they do.
And they want to do it.
And they want to do it, yeah.
I think, Ken, you got that video ready to go? Okay. I just want to warn the audience, if you have young children, there are a couple of instances in this movie I don't think would be appropriate for young children. So anytime you're ready, Ken, thank you.
This is the story of your enslavement, how it came to be, and how you can finally be free. Like all animals, human beings want to dominate and exploit the resources around them. At first, we mostly hunted and fished and ate off the land, but then something magical and terrible happened to our minds. We became, alone among the animals, afraid of death and of future loss. And this was the start of a great tragedy and an even greater possibility. You see, when we become afraid of death, of injury and imprisonment, we become controllable and so valuable in a way that no other resource could ever be. The greatest resource for any human being to control is not natural resources or tools or animals or land, but other human beings. You can frighten an animal because animals are afraid of pain in the moment, but you cannot frighten an animal with a loss of liberty, with torture or imprisonment in the future, because animals have very little sense of tomorrow. You cannot threaten a cow with torture or a sheep with death. You cannot swing a sword at a tree and scream at it to produce more fruit, or hold a burning torch to a field and demand more wheat. You cannot get more eggs by threatening a hen, but you can get a man to give you his eggs by threatening him. This human farming has been the most profitable and destructive occupation throughout history, and it is now reaching its destructive climax. Human society cannot be rationally understood until it is seen for what it is: a series of farms where human farmers own human livestock. Some people get confused because governments provide healthcare and water and education and roads, and thus imagine that there is some benevolence at work. Nothing could be further from the reality. Farmers provide healthcare and irrigation and training to their livestock. Some people get confused because we are allowed certain liberties and thus imagine that our governments protect our freedoms. But farmers plant their crops a certain distance apart to increase their yields, and will allow certain animals larger stalls or fields if it means they will produce more meat and milk. In your country, your tax farm, your farmer grants you certain freedoms, not because he cares about your liberties, but because he wants to increase his profits. Are you beginning to see the nature of the cage you were born into? There have been 4 major phases of human farming. The first phase in ancient Egypt was direct and brutal human compulsion. Human bodies were controlled, but the creative productivity of the human mind remained beyond the reach of the whip and the brand and the shackles. Slaves remained woefully underproductive and required enormous resources to control. The second phase was the Roman model, wherein slaves were granted some capacity for freedom, ingenuity, and creativity, which raised their productivity. This increased the wealth of Rome, and thus the tax income of the Roman government, and with this additional wealth Rome became an empire, destroying the economic freedoms that fed its power, and collapsed. I'm sure that this does not seem entirely unfamiliar. After the collapse of Rome, the feudal model introduced the concept of livestock ownership and taxation. Instead of being directly owned, peasants farmed land that they could retain as long as they paid off the local warlords. This model eventually broke down due to the continual subdivision of productive land and was destroyed during the enclosure movement when land was consolidated and hundreds of thousands of peasants were kicked off their ancestral lands because new farming techniques made larger farms more productive with fewer people. The increased productivity of the later Middle Ages created the excess food required for the expansion of towns and cities, which in turn gave rise to the modern democratic model of human ownership. As displaced peasants flooded into the cities, a huge stock of cheap human capital became available to the rising industrialists. And the ruling class of human farmers quickly realized that they could make more money by letting their livestock choose their own occupations. Under the democratic model, direct slave ownership has been replaced by the mafia model. The mafia rarely owns businesses directly, but rather sends thugs around once a month to steal from the business owners. You are now allowed to choose your own occupation, which raises your productivity, and thus the taxes you can pay to your masters.
Value this time in your life, kids, because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. 30s, you raise your family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, what happened to my 20s? 40s, you grow a little pot belly, you grow another chin. The music starts to get too loud. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. 50s, you have a minor surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. 60s, you'll have a major surgery. The music is still loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. 70s, you and the wife retire to Fort Lauderdale. Start eating dinner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You have lunch around 10, breakfast the night before. Spend most of your time wandering around malls looking for the ultimate soft yogurt and muttering, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? The 80s, you'll have a major stroke. You end up battling with some Jamaican nurse who your wife can't stand, but who you call mama. Any questions?
Your few freedoms are preserved because they are profitable to your owners. The great challenge of the democratic model is that increases in wealth and freedom threaten the farmers. The ruling classes initially profit from a relatively free market in capital and labor, but as their livestock become more used to their freedoms and growing wealth, they begin to question why they need rulers at all. Ah, well, nobody ever said that human farming was easy. Keeping the taxed livestock securely in the compounds of the ruling classes is a three-phase process. The first is to indoctrinate the young through government, quote, education. As the wealth of democratic countries grew, government schools were universally inflicted in order to control the thoughts and souls of the livestock. The second phase is to turn citizens against each other through the creation of dependent livestock. It is very difficult to rule human beings directly through force, and where it can be achieved, it remains cripplingly underproductive, as can be seen in North Korea. Human beings do not breed well or produce efficiently in direct captivity. But if human beings believe that they are free, then they will produce much more for their farmers. The best way to maintain this illusion of freedom is to put some of the livestock on the payroll of the farmer. Those cows that become dependent on the existing hierarchy will then attack any other cows who point out the violence, hypocrisy, and immorality of human ownership.
Officers positioned Grant face first on the floor with one officer near his head, a second near his back, and a third officer standing nearby. There appeared to be a brief struggle. Then, a 2-year veteran BART officer stands, draws his weapon, and fires.
Freedom is slavery, and slavery is freedom. If you can get the cows to attack each other whenever anybody brings up the reality of their situation, then you don't have to spend nearly as much controlling them directly. Those cows who become dependent upon the stolen largesse of the farmer will violently oppose any questioning of the virtue of human ownership, and the intellectual and artistic classes, always and forever dependent upon the farmers, will say to anyone who demands freedom from ownership, you will harm your fellow cows. The livestock are thus kept enclosed by shifting the moral responsibility for the destructiveness of the violent system to those who demand real freedom. The third phase is to invent continual external threats so that the frightened livestock cling to the protection of the farmers. This system of human farming is now nearing its end. The terrible tragedies of modern Western economic systems has occurred not in spite of, but because of past economic freedoms. The massive increases in Western wealth throughout the 19th century resulted from economic freedoms. And it was this very increase in wealth that fed the size and power of the state. Whenever the livestock become exponentially more productive, you get a corresponding increase in the number of farmers and their dependents. The growth of the state is always proportional to the preceding economic freedoms. Economic freedoms create wealth, and the wealth attracts more thieves and political parasites, whose greed then destroys the economic freedoms. In other words, freedom metastasizes the cancer of the state. The government that starts off the smallest will always end up the largest. This is why there can be no viable and sustainable alternative to a truly free and peaceful society. A society without political rulers, without human ownership, without the violence of taxation and statism. To be truly free is both very easy and very hard. We avoid the horror of our enslavement because it is so painful to see it directly. We dance around the endless violence of our dying system because we fear the attacks of our fellow livestock. But we can only be kept in the cages we refuse to see. Wake up. To see the farm is to leave it.
To see the farm is to leave it. Interesting, interesting. Are we cattle? Are we the farmers? Gentlemen.
Well, with the massive amount of regulations that have been passed in the last 6 months, that would put us down as cattle.
I'd like to be known as a bull if we're not as cattle.
Yeah, when we're led to believe that we're governed by those we give a consent to govern us, and then we wind up asking ourselves the question, what do we do now? Because our government leaders are doing things that we find abusive and intrusive and somewhat lacking in moral character. We ask, can we have our chief of police go arrest the president? Is he really going to do that? Can he go and arrest a senator? Is he really going to do that because we were filing a complaint? There are those who tried to impeach our present commander-in-chief, and to no avail. So, given that we live in are we living in an illusion that, like cattle, we're not really free, but we believe we're free because we were told that we have all these freedoms, and yet we're told also there's certain things you can't do. You can't yell fire in a movie theater. You can't verbally assault the president while he's giving a speech because you're going to be escorted off by Secret Service. You can't sit in a court of law until they judge how you really feel, because his gavel's going to hit that table and he's going to say you're out of order and contempt of court and either going to pay a fine or jail or both. So what happened to your freedom of speech? But the Supreme Court justices tell us we can burn the American flag because it's a symbolic gesture of the First Amendment, I mean the freedom of speech. We can do that, but we can't voice our opinion to certain people and certain status. Is that freedom?
374, wasn't it?
So, I don't know. I would have to say that we are the cattle being led astray in an illusional farm that says by the farmers, yeah, you guys can graze wherever you want to, you're free, and maybe someday you can own your own ranch.
When I grew up in Hawaii, my grandfather and uncles had a cattle ranch. a little over 500 acres, and we had a lot of cattle. And now I think I know how one of the cattle feels in a squeeze chute. We used to squeeze them cattle and get everything we could out of them before we shot them.
Well, you know, to me, this was a heavy video. I mean, we could spend days and days breaking it down and talking about it. But basically, I think what I get from it is that man can only be self-actualized if he is free, and freedom is the essence of life. It is the only reason to live your life. You know what I mean? You're free to. You're politically free to voice an opinion, free to vote for whom you want, free to move to where you want, everything that, you know, your freedom, religious freedom, to believe who you want, to believe in the God of your choice, you know, that you're not answerable to anybody but the God as you define him. Economic freedom, you know, and economic freedom of the capitalist model with Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. But, you know, to me it's so obvious. Social freedom, that we can associate with whom we want, that people cannot be discriminated against, that everyone has due process and equal protection. But if you break that down, freedom means that you are accountable and answerable to yourself. That whatever your station is like, however you're born, we have a compulsory education system. You have an opportunity to achieve that today that is not unlike that immigrants that came to America before the frontier was closed. There are just countless opportunities, and it really breaks my heart to see the kind of regulation and heavy-handed government we have. In fact, our very freedoms are being threatened with government. Over the last 4 years, almost $5 trillion in deficits, and that's just from the that's just from the federal government. The Fed is pumping money now. It's it should be close to $3 trillion in additional money being pumped. So our currency is being devalued. Our ability to pay back our debts is threatened. The future generation of our children is being destroyed. I can't think of anything that government runs that they haven't destroyed. We pay into Social Security, and as soon as the baby boomers hit Social Security, the trust fund is bankrupt because they pilfered it. Medicare, you know, it pays out far more than people have put into it, and then they wonder why it's going broke. They can't run a train, Amtrak. They can't run a post office. You can't show me. They can't protect the border. You can't show me anything that government does. I'm talking about federal government because I think there's a lot of good state governments out there, and I'm proud to call myself an Idahoan.
So am I.
And you know, but when you create a culture of dependency, and I'm not talking Social Security and Medicare, people have paid into that, but you know, you cannot have a productive culture where people are not held accountable for their actions. We all have our sad stories, and we can all look back and say, well, you know, I wasn't dealt a full hand. But you know, you're not promised a rose garden when you come into this world. You're given life, liberty, and then you have a right to pursue your happiness. God gives you life. God brings you into this world free. That's the way He meant you to be. That's where you achieve the most human productivity. To self-actualize, your pursuit of happiness is your individual expression of what it means to be a fulfilled, happy person, because you have defined yourself in terms that only you can appreciate and only you have to justify to yourself. And you know, without freedom, then you have slavery. And I can't imagine the horror of being a slave and to think about being somebody else's property. Well, you know, today it's just it's a new kind of dependency, isn't it?
But isn't the dependency on our government slavery, in a way? And you know, you said something earlier that you didn't know what the government did good. Well, I think they do really good in keeping tabs on each and every one of us, especially now with the surveillance the way it is.
I think freedom is interpretive. And I can give you 2 instances on that depends on how you look at it. Now, after the 3rd debate, there were over 500 tweets on Twitter of death threats where people made actual threats. I'm going to kill Romney, and then I'm going to the mall, and I am going to riot. Those were threats. Now, whether they could have fulfilled those or not makes no difference. Those were actual threats, which is a felony violation. That's a felony by federal law that was done, that was passed after Kennedy was assassinated. Now, after the election, a young lady on Facebook, on her private line, stated, OMG, another 4 years. I hope, that was her word, hope someone kills him. Within 24 hours, she was picked up by the Secret Service, she lost her job, and she was kicked out of her apartment. Nothing happened. Not one single person who tweeted those death threats was picked up. Not a single one. But that girl who just hoped on a private tweet, it was not put on Facebook itself, but put on her private line, that she hoped someone would do the nasty deed, was picked up by the Secret Service and lost her home and her job.
Well, I don't think anybody should be threatening anybody. My only point is that I just want to be left alone. I think I feel like I'm a big boy. I can make my own choices. I don't need somebody hovering over my head and watching my every step. If I do something that is unlawful, then I expect to be held accountable. That's part of freedom too, is accepting the consequences of your bad actions.
Yeah, but what action? She did not violate any law, none whatsoever. The ones who violated laws, nothing happened to.
It's against the law to threaten the president.
She did not threaten him.
What did she do?
Made a wish. No, she didn't threaten him.
But that's splitting hairs.
That's not splitting hairs. It is a violation. It is a felony to threaten anybody who is running for the office of President of the United States.
I think his point here, and a point.
You're talking about hypocrisy, sure.
No, I think his point here, guys. I think his point here, and I agree with your point, is all the, be it threats or not, that was vented towards Romney, no action was taken. But yes, a simple, however we want to conclude it, immediately that individual was picked up.
Do we know that for a fact? Do we really know?
We don't.
Yes,
I don't.
Do we know that Romney, that the government didn't take action against somebody that threatened Romney?
Actually, you got a point there too.
He had Secret Service protection. I know that.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, but there was absolutely no follow-up in any of the media. Nothing was brought up on any newspaper article. There were no follow-up on any newspaper articles. Nothing.
My only thing is you can't outlaw crazy. I mean, there's
no, you can't. You can't. But on Facebook, you have someone who puts up there, and it runs for a week on Facebook. Somebody please kill